ahead and start when you're ready.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Stoic Bodywork podcast. Just a quick reminder that all the information shared here is for general informational purposes only and isn't intended as professional, medical, or legal advice. All right, let's get started.
Thanks, Octavia. Welcome to another episode of the Stoic Bodywork podcast. My name is Phil. I'm the host and creator of this podcast, obviously joined by Octavia, my wonderful co-host. And we are doing a follow-up episode to Dr. Nicole. Dr. Nicole was on last episode to talk about her experience in the oncology world and generally treating cancer, but her specialization was in treating breast cancer. And we went over quite a bit. Highly recommend checking that podcast episode out. But as always with guest episodes, I'm going to do a follow up and talk about my thoughts and some things I learned from the podcast and little pieces of information I would like to add in. I think to start, I'd like to cover the preventative side of talking about, this is a health and wellness podcast. So I'll broaden it out to not just cancer, but disease in general. But is specific to the preventatives for cancer. Octavia, could you tell us what are the general recommendations for preventatives to help control cancer or risk?
Absolutely. So, some of the general recommendations for cancer prevention include maintaining a healthy diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables, staying physically active, keeping a healthy weight, avoiding tobacco, and limiting alcohol. It's also important to stay up to date with screenings and vaccinations like the HPV vaccine, which can help reduce the risk of certain cancers.
Great. And those were the things that Dr. Nicole iterated to us. So, you know, when we talk about preventatives, one of the big ones is just health and wellness in general, but the exercise side of things gets tossed around a lot just for controlling all disease. And so I think I'll cover a little bit on that topic to start. When we talk about a preventative to something, we're talking about something that lowers the risk factors in the entire health and wellness market, everything from going to see the doctor to the insurance companies to even just the physical fitness side of, just doing general training. When we talk about the statistics or how something can bring down your all cause mortality chance, they're really just talking about the statistical markers. And so when we talk about exercise controlling statistical markers, we're talking about it controlling body weight. That's like the number one thing, right? Cardiovascular health, that's the number two thing. And the reason for that is because they kind of go together. Body weight controls how hard our system has to work doing anything, and the cardiovascular health is how everything gets through the system. So, anytime you start limiting systems, and that's just a basic overview. Don't shoot me for that one, but when we talk about any dysfunction to a system, we're talking about increasing risks to the rest of the system as well. Smoking, something I used to do when I was a bouncer, I'd go out on the porch, smoke a cigarette with everybody, take an eye, get the ashtrays, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, I'd smoke a pack in a weekend. That caused damage to my lung tissue. And by product of my lung tissue being damaged, I wasn't getting a lot of oxygen appropriately into the system. And so the cardiovascular health was suffering. But I was also adding toxins in that needed to be filtered out. So not only did the lung tissue have to filter out toxics, I was also absorbing other toxins. So my kidneys and my liver had to do that as well. Same thing for drinking. If you're drinking heavily, your liver has to filter out things. And so it might not be able to filter out some of the other things it's supposed to be because it's too focused on the alcohol. So anytime we start affecting one system, we're increasing risks throughout the rest of the systems. And that's when we talk about preventatives, lowering your all cause mortality or lowering your cancer risk or lowering your, heart disease risks. That's how all of those systems add in to make up that term or that phrasing. Um, when we talk about exercise, controlling that, we're talking about how exercise can help boost the function of all those things. So, cardiovascular health, we talk about doing VO2 max works to make sure that your volume of oxygen, that's what VO2 means, volume oxygen, is able to be at a peak level so that you can get oxygen into the system. It also tells us how well your lungs are working. A lot of people don't respond to VO2 max training unless it's done a specific way. That's probably a whole nother episode to get into training protocols. But those preventatives and how exercise can become a preventative has to do with how it increases the capacity for the system to do all of those different pieces correctly and efficiently. Octavia, anything you want to add to that part? Octavia is not listening, apparently.
Oh, I am definitely listening. That was a fantastic overview. I think you covered it real well. Exercise definitely plays a huge role in keeping all of our systems functioning at their best, and it really does help reduce those risk factors across the board.
All right, thanks. Let's move on to what I think is one of the major preventives. When we talk about exercise, we also have to talk about diet. And so let's talk about processed foods, because I think processed foods are my number one as far as most all-cause mortalities and just disease or cancer risk. We didn't get into a lot of recommendations with Dr. Nicole about, diet and even exercise to that degree, just that, you should be monitoring those things. So I want to dive a little deeper with my information I have. So nothing I'm about to say was anything her and I really discussed at length, but she did mention how the American Cancer Society treats red meat as a carcinogen. I personally, this is a personal opinion, not even a professional opinion, personal opinion, I don't agree with that statement. The reason I don't agree with that statement is because we're not looking at red meat as far as red meat, right? So we're looking at the hormones that go into red meat. We're looking at the, all of the different things in the grains that these animals are eating. Red meat itself is probably not a carcinogen, in my personal opinion. Not even a professional opinion, just a personal opinion. And what do I really know anyway? What we're really looking at is additives to the food structure. And this would mean that any food that is overly processed, has additives, and it just isn't natural in whatever way that, comes across, is probably a carcinogen. That's just what we're talking about at this point. So for one specific thing, and look, they do mention processed foods. Dr. Nicole mentions processed foods. But when we blanket statement things, oh, red meat's bad for you because it's a carcinogen, that's kind of BS, right? Like, are certain people probably going to have higher risk factors because they eat red meat? Yeah, people are so freaking different. It's ridiculous. But what we need to look at, in my personal opinion, again, is what are the additives to that red meat? What is going into the food supplies? Where are these things being raised or grown? What is the finishing process? In the American culture, we've gotten into this whole grass-fed beef and all of these other great things. I mean, these would be wonderful things if they were true. They're not true. All it takes in the United States of America for something to be considered grass-fed is for it to be grass-finished, which means the last, I believe it's 10 weeks of its life has to be done on grass. Octavia, can you look that up? Can you look at what the qualification for something to be considered grass-fed is in the United States of America?
Sure thing. In the United States, for beef to be labeled as grass fed, it generally means that the animal has been fed grass and forage for the entirety of its life, with the exception of milk prior to weaning. But you are right that there can be some nuances, and sometimes cattle can be finished on grass for a certain period to meet that label. It's always good to look a little deeper into where the meat is coming from.
Yeah. In commercial farming, I'm going ahead and going to make a blanket statement to say that most of it's going to be grass finished and not actually grass fed, just like USDA choice and all of that stuff. All of these certifications we've come up with are just kind of bogus, right? For something to be vegan or, to be organic, right? They have all these certifications out there. Well, for something to be organic, all they have to do is not use a pesticide that's on the non-organic list. All they have to do is use a fertilizer that's on the non-organic list, right? Like, they just have to avoid a list of things. And if something hasn't gotten tested or studied enough yet, it's not on that list yet. So they still get the certification. We know chemicals cause problems. One of the things I talked about with Dr. Nicole was about the word carcinogen and how chemicals are like, they're the ones we know the most about. We know chemicals are carcinogens. Is every chemical a carcinogen? Probably can't make that statement. But we do know there is a majority of chemicals that are carcinogens. and getting them into your system, specifically through your food, is not going to be healthy for you. And so, as far as monitoring your diet and exercise, when it comes to your diet, look, weed out the noise. And I mean that facetiously. Get rid of the blanket statements. If you hear a blanket statement, it's probably just trying to curve your opinion on one thing or another. We've changed our minds about red meat and bread and all these things so many different times in this country. What we need to be focusing on is, where did it come from? How was it produced? Is it healthy for you? And look, I'm a middle of the road kind of person. So when I make that statement, I'm simply looking at, if you don't know where it came from, probably shouldn't eat it. That's, I don't know where that was produced. I don't know how it was raised or finished. I don't know, even how it was harvested, where it sat forever. And yes, this is hard when you have, little ones at home or have families, or if you're trying to be on a budget. It's tough to do these things. I generally look at the center of the grocery store as all poison. And that, getting off my high horse with all the diet and stuff and the food cultures and also the food production system, I want to focus on preservatives. Preservatives are chemicals, right? So backing up and getting off my high horse there, here's a better statement, middle of the road. If you see a list of preservatives, or if there's more than 10 or 12 things in something you're eating, pay more attention. In most cases, as someone who has a big culinary background, I was, I worked in a lot of restaurants, bars. I've done everything from short order to fine dining. Most dishes have no more than 6, 7 ingredients at the maximum range, right? If something has 10 ingredients, we're doing some crazy stuff. Mostly it's baking or something along those lines. But, most just real food is just some seasonings and some fat, salt, and acid, right? That makes flavor. So look at what's in. If you have to look at a paragraph of stuff, it's probably not good for you, right? Even if it is cheap, it's not worth, giving up your health for that. So moving out of that, I can go on, and maybe I'll even I would love to get a nutritionist on and talk about some of these topics. It's hard to eat healthy, and it's specifically hard to eat healthy if you are someone who might be at risk for cancer or might be at risk for other disease functions, and being mindful of it is really important. So, processed foods equal bad. And Dr. Nicole said that. So, I totally agree with that statement. And as a middle of the road person who sometimes has a high horse now and then, yeah, I'll get off my soapbox, go with no processed foods, exercise regularly, specifically targeting, if you have an all-cause mortality risk, you'll be cancer or other diseases that is specific to a function of the body, you'd want to focus on that function of the body. So that gets into, if it's lung capacity issues, VO2 maxing; if it's cardiovascular health, just doing general exercise routines, walking, getting your sunshine. But you can also target towards, maybe I need more fluids in my diet, right? Maybe you are dehydrated, so your kidneys and liver aren't processing correctly. So these are things to talk to your doctor about, as always. Again, not against doctors, I'm against education systems. I probably shouldn't make that statement that way, but yeah, I'm going to go with it. Anyway, she also mentioned sunscreen. So when we talk about preventatives, this is one I have a tough time with because of what I just said about if you have to read a paragraph of stuff. A lot of sunscreens have a lot of chemicals in them. Is there sunscreens that, like they have the zinc oxide? Yeah, but most people want like the tanning lotions and like the sunscreens. Just read the label. You got to read the label, and you got to look out for things. If you can't pronounce it, you might want to look it up. There's going to be a lot of that. I'm a realist though, right? If you have any risk in the family of skin cancer, clearly you're going to want to be covered up either under shade, by clothing, or with a sunscreen with an SPF protector. I prefer, me personally, to create a base tan when possible. And so when we talk about sunscreen, though, my understanding is kind of a mix between the two arguments, right? Like wear SPF bajillion comparatively to tan naturally. I think it's really good to create a base tan. And the best way to create a base tan is to go out in the sun, monitoring the UV index. If the UV index is 8, don't be out there for more than 15 minutes, right? If the UV index is 2 or 3, all right, half hour, 45 minutes. Monitor the UV index and go out and tan for an appropriate amount of time based on the UV index to create a base tan where you're getting the UV from the sun non-filtered, right? No windows, no sunscreen, none of that. And only do it for that period of time that is, relatively safe. If you're feeling like it might not be, okay, cut 15 down to 10. And monitor your skin tone, temperature, and feeling. Skin gets tingly when it's under UV light for a duration of time because it's heating, right? We're bringing blood up through the retinacular into the capillary system to absorb the sunlight to create vitamin D. We're doing that through the melanin production, the melanocytes. And when we are under the sun and we're getting direct sunlight, non-filtered, we're producing, I'm probably going to get this a little bit wrong, but we're producing three different types of melanin. One of the melanins is the one that controls our skin tone. That's the actual tanning function. The other two melanins are for brain activity. They're neurotransmitters. So, Octavia, can you actually look that up? Can you look up, we have, I think it's melanin, I think it's ABC. Is it melanin A, B, and C?
Sure, I can clarify that. So, the type of melanin that affects skin color and tanning is called eumelanin. And then there's also pheomelanin, which contributes to red and yellow hues in hair and skin. These are the main types when it comes to pigmentation. Melanin does play a role in protecting the skin from UV radiation and is involved in various biological processes, but it's not typically broken down into categories like A, B, and C for different neurotransmitter functions. But it's definitely fascinating how it all works together.
But there is a neurotransmitter that's based on melanin, right? From the melanocytes.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Melanocytes, which produce melanin, are also involved in the production of certain neurotransmitters. For example, melanin concentrating hormone, or MCH, is one of those substances, and it's involved in regulating appetite and energy. It's really interesting how these cells have multiple roles in the body.
Perfect. So, yeah, you know, when we're talking about tanning, if you don't get that UV light, you're not getting that. And this is on the whole mitochondria side of things. I'll have to do a whole nother episode for this one. I have someone very specific in mind for talking about these processes. But when we talk about mitochondrial health, we can dive even deep into that. But it is a function of the system to get sunlight and to do things with it. And so getting non UV filtered sunlight for a specific duration of time that is safe is my personal preference as far as creating a base tan and then working up from that. So you might even start in the beginning of the spring and go out, start tanning, UV index is low, do your time out in the sun, go back underneath the shade or cover up, or then put on an SPF. If you're a sensitive individual, cut that time down. Talk to your dermatologist about these things. And then as you build up that base tan, you'll also have your own natural protection, which is a great thing to have. And then you can use the, sunscreen on top of that if you feel it necessary. I don't really wear sunscreen myself, but I'm also, a crazy farm kid from back in the day when, we just would go out, you get one good pink layer and then you build a tan on top of that. It just keeps building. And then by the end of the summer, you're just a totally different color. But zinc oxide is probably the one that I've done enough research on to say, yeah, if I was going to choose one, I'm probably choosing zinc oxide. Yeah, you're going to have the crazy, brushed on, look like you were painted white, with a primer. That's what you're going to look like. Okay, that's just how it is. So yeah, as always, do some research on that. But again, if you look at the label and you can't understand what's on it, probably not good for your skin, probably not good for you, probably going to cause some of your other systems to have to do a lot of work. So, be mindful of those things. Moving into, what else did we talk about here? Oh, the avoiding plastics thing. Oh, this is one. So plastics are everywhere. They're just everywhere. There's no getting away from plastics. Plastics are a byproduct of the petroleum industry. And look, I'm not getting into the climate discussion and the. I'm middle of the road. I'm going to say that a bajillion times in this podcast. I'm middle of the road. The middle of the road on this subject is we can't live without plastics. It's not possible. We've gone too far down that route that it's impossible to do so. But just like everything else, you have to be mindful, right? I drink bottled water. I'm willing to make the sacrifice of dealing with microplastics in my water because I'm probably going to get it from the tap water anyway, but I don't trust the tap water where I live. So I prefer to drink bottled water because the bottled water also has a mineral content and a pH level that helps my system a lot. I'm, I've done a lot of research on what's known as heavy water, so deuterium levels. So I choose a water that helps make me more healthy. That comes in plastic. What am I going to do? Getting glass, that is not an option for me. If it was, I probably would. But then there's the whole, I'll feel bad making someone carry a heavy box to my house full of glass bottles instead of just water. There's trade-offs everywhere. Middle of the road, be mindful. Try to use BPA, BPHE, free, PFEA, all those different categories as far as things that we know are carcinogens and know are toxics. Try to avoid those as much as possible. Using glass containers in the fridge. If something's going to sit in something for a while and you can make a choice between am I going to put it in a glass container or a plastic container? Well, try to choose the glass container, right? Because at least then if it's going to sit, it's controlled. And these are the things we're going to have to manage as a species just because plastics are everywhere. They're not going away. There's no way to get rid of them at this point. We wouldn't even be able to function as a society if plastic wasn't around. It's just true. The device you're listening to or watching me on right now, plastic wouldn't exist without it. So unless we're willing to give up all that and make everything out of wood, which we don't have the wood content for, we got to stop cutting down rainforests. I can tell you that right now. Stop cutting down forests. That's, pretty middle of the road anyway. But moving on. Dr. Nicole's statement that she made was she's pretty sure that we're going to find out down the line that plastics cause a lot of this stuff. And I would agree with her. Yeah. Like, anytime the system has to deal with those leaching effects or I just as a random offshoot, because she is specializes in breast cancer, there's a whole lot of disease sets that go on with female breast tissue and mammary gland function that we necessarily wouldn't even put into the category of plastics. But if a woman has had a breast augmentation, and we talked about this a little bit with her when, if there's surgery to removal, do they want to get implants? Do they not? Do they want to have a reconstruction? How do they want to go about that if, they are going through treatment and they required surgery for the breast cancer? Well, when we talk about the implants, I've had clients in the past who were poisoned, literally poisoned by their implants. And so there's some sort of leaching there. They're plastic by sort of silicone, yes. But look, everything has a chemical and it's all probably bad for us anyway. But so there's just a lot of considerations to be making, and it's just things to be mindful of. That is the entire game of preventatives. Anytime we talk about preventative medicine, we talk about preventative actions, we talk about preventative causes, we talk about preventative lifestyle choices. We're talking about doing a research set that is specific to yourself and your situation, and just trying to make the best decisions you can with what you got. If you don't have a gym to get to, go for a walk, get out and about. If you can't avoid plastics, try to make your exposure as limited as possible. What else are we talking about here? If you can't get rid of processed foods, maybe you are under restriction as far as like you have a kid in the house who only will eat this, and it just happens to be that like one box of, crackers that they really like or something like that. Look, kids got to eat, right? But trying to curve that over time or You work with what you got. If it's yourself individually and you're just like, man, I eat a lot of processed foods, start small. Choices beget change. So if you start correlating your choices, you will get the change and the outcome you're looking for. Start with, I'm going to buy a better version of something. I'm a huge fan of buying better versions of things just to get started. There's a perception that goes behind the foods that we eat, right? If I tell you to put it on a salad, you're going to be, what are you talking about? You can eat unhealthy, put it on a salad. You'll get healthier. Here's why. Your brain will start perceiving eating healthier because we look at salads and we go, oh, that's healthier, right? So if you take all the lunch meats, all the terrible processed foods that, are lunch meats, and you put those on a salad compared to the sandwich with all the sauce and, just the greasy nonsense and all the sugar, well, now it's perceived as a little bit healthier. Great. Awesome. First start. Go with it. Stepping stones. Just start small. That's true for anything. You can put anything on a salad. You can also put anything in a taco. So just try to choose things that are a little bit better instead of trying to make giant leaps. But that also requires you to have some self-awareness and some knowledge of how you make your decisions and what you'll actually follow and do. So, that's a self-awareness exercise right there. Moving into monitoring. This is, I think, honestly, based on the self-awareness stuff too, but Dr. Nicole talked about how, you can monitor your cancer risks, but also there's genetic testing. We know about a lot of genes now that increase risks and that people should be monitored. Her recommendation was, or the general recommendation, I think, that she was making that is given to her from her, I can't remember the American Cancer. You'll have to go back and watch the episode to get the exact name of but she has a guidelines that is published every year that gives her risk assessment factors and recommendations to make. And one of the recommendations was, and I think they've been making this one for a while, if you have someone in your family who had a specific type of cancer or was at risk for in some way and was getting tested, you want to get tested 10 years before they got it. Right. So if you had someone in your cancer get something at 35, you want to start at 25. General testing is a base that you can talk to your PCP about, but I believe she mentioned a lot of general testing starts around 40, 35, 40 around there. I think for 35, it's we talk about colon cancers, specifically on the male side, prostate exams and colon exams, colonoscopies, just to, I think, generally start at 35, 36, somewhere around the 38 as a blanket statement. But if you had someone in your family who got it before then, you would want to take 10 years off and look at it there. What we're talking really about is monitoring your system, and screening and tests are an option, right? If you want to get genetic testing, she did have some caveats about genetic testings, right? You have to be mindful. There is, she was mentioning how you better get an insurance policy ahead of time. You better have all those things in place because it will disqualify you. If the gene happens to be in your system, well, not in your system, if the gene happens to be expressing or you're found to be at risk. So go back and listen to her specific recommendations on that, because I think they were very clear and they were very concise about, genetic testing is a great thing and it gives us a lot of information, but there's some things to be mindful of if you're going to go that route. One of the other things her and I both talked about was weight loss. And I'm going to expand this out to body functions in general. Most of the time we are targeting a 1 to 2 pound weight loss when we're working with someone, as far as training or just managing weight. Anything outside that range is actually pretty extraordinary. And so I'm going to sidestep here slightly because I think everyone needs to hear the following. Our bodies don't lose weight easily. They're not designed to. They're designed to get fat. Your entire system is designed to take in fuel and resources and hold on to them. We try to be as efficient as possible. The entire human system is designed to be efficient. And so anytime it's doing something extremely fast, or on the other side of that, extremely slow, it's something to be mindful of. And so if you've lost 10 pounds out of nowhere and really didn't do much, you might want to check. Now, this could be on any different factor, right? I'm not saying it has to be cancer. I'm saying your body is doing a function it's not really designed to do. We target 1 to 2 pound weight loss weekly because it's a safe, effective way that doesn't overtax the system and is sustainable. If we vary outside that range with someone who's, obese or morbidly obese, okay, there's more function for the body to burn off. It also takes a lot more calories to move that person, so they might burn fat quicker. On the opposite side of that, they probably also put it on quicker too. So we might see a fluctuation. As we step down into the quote unquote normal ranges, 1 to 2 pounds is the general average. You can make some extrapolations towards the individual or yourself. If you're in the health and wellness world and you're working with someone, check out the individual you're working with and, monitor what you feel is a comfortable range that they might be able to lose weight inside of and then sustain that weight loss without causing undue stress, right? So overtaxing the kidneys or the liver, causing digestive problems, causing lethargy or mental health issues, causing, what's the other one I'm thinking of here? Muscle wasting, right? Are they burning off muscle because they don't have enough calories in the system? Not exactly what we're targeting to do here. So monitoring these things. In your own system, if you're someone who stays within a certain range, if you're in that range and it goes up a couple pounds, goes down a couple pounds, okay. If you start to spike in and out of that range, it's something to be mindful of. It's something to keep at least a note about, which is another point that she brought up. I loved her saying about anything can be solved with a notepad and a piece of paper, right? Like just keep notes. We have phones nowadays. Write yourself a note, text yourself a note. Being mindful of your system is your responsibility. You are responsible for that body. You are just a consciousness that controls a body. And not even my personal, this is based in the Stoic Bodywork methods. Stoic Bodywork is based on the understanding that there's a physical health body, a mental health body, a spiritual health body. The spiritual health body is something I will get into eventually, but the mental and the physical are something I know a decent bit about. And I can tell you that the mental health body does the translations between the other two, and it also does most of the commanding of the physical. And so when you say, I'm going to go do this, or I want this, or I need this, or I have, your body has to listen to these commands, which makes you responsible for it. And so when I look at someone and they're not taking care of themselves, I worry about them in the sense of why don't they want to take care of themselves? That probably starts in the mental side of things. When we talk about the physical form and how you're responsible for it, now that you know that, you're fully on responsible. You don't get to claim any ignorance about it or anything like that. You're responsible for what you put in your body. You're responsible for what you do with your body and all of the different caveats that come along with that. So when we talk about being mindful of monitoring what's going on in the system, you're also responsible for that too. I know it sounds gross, but monitoring your stool and your evacuation. What Dr. Nicole talked about specifically with older individuals, monitoring. Oh, did she talk about it? Oh yeah, I think she did. Monitoring stool, but she was mentioning blood in stool. But I think she also brought up urine color. Or if not, I had a conversation with someone about it recently. If your urine color is dark, you're probably dehydrated. Or your body is processing something that colored it, right? So everyone's always done the asparagus thing with the smell. That's another factor. But I think a lot of people have had the experience where they'll take a multivitamin or they'll take some sort of supplement and you'll see a change in your urine color. That's something to be mindful of. It's something you should be monitoring, right? Every other mammal in the world does this. You've watched your dog or cat do this. They monitor their output. And one of the things behind that is your digestive system, which is my next topic here as far as monitoring, gut biome, super important. If the gut biome is not working correctly, you're not getting the nutrition levels you need to get. And this also gets into the preventative side. I actually thought about discussing this during the preventatives, but when we talk about gut biome and how it's functioning, we're also talking about the processes of the body outside of the gut biome with kidneys and liver and processing fluids. these things give you force feedback to tell you what might be going on with your system. So you should be monitoring it, and you should be either writing it down or making notes or bringing it up in conversation with your doctors. I do a ton of self-monitoring from everything from, what's my skin telling me? Can I pinch my skin? Am I dehydrated at the knuckles? If you pinch your knuckle, specifically right around your index knuckle, and you the center knuckle there, you pinch it and it doesn't respond like a spongy, kind of like goes back to normal very quickly, you might be dehydrated. So that's one way to monitor it. What's your skin tone? Have you been tanning? Have you not been tanning? Does your skin look thin, or there's so much force feedback in the system. It's just good to pay attention to. I get it in the bodywork side of things all the time, where people just don't realize that they're functioning incorrectly. They don't realize that a muscle isn't functioning correctly. And this isn't people's fault. It's the education system. And it goes beyond just the Western medicine education system, deep into all of the education systems. You were never taught about your body. And I'm sorry for that. No one ever sat you down and talked about your systems and how they function together. And if they did, it was very basic and it wasn't enough. We should be doing way more anatomy and physiology, people. We should be doing a lot more biology as far as function goes, talking about the systems of the body and how they interact, how they regulate, what disharmony and dysfunction looks like, what disease looks like, because our bodies literally give us all the information we need to figure all that out. We just often ignore it because you were taught to do that, right? Ignore pain, ignore that. No, don't ignore these things. Understand them. So let's talk about bodywork and cancer, and also disease and bodywork. I never actually took any oncology training as far as bodywork goes. It wasn't part of my training sets. It's one of the rare forms of bodywork and or massage that I don't know about, except for the key to all of this, which is contraindications and indications. So I wanted to give people a breakdown of some things that they probably don't know about as far as how bodywork interacts with disease. And specifically, because Dr. Nicole was an oncologist and we talk about cancer, and she was a DO, and DOs typically get trained in a manual manipulation method as far as treating goes. It's contraindicated, which means it's not something you want to do for someone who's going through cancer treatment. Now, when radiation was more prominent, that was one of the number one things is you don't touch someone with radiation because you yourself could absorb the radiation, and it kept it from targeting specific areas of the body. As we moved into chemotherapies and non-radiation of options, there is still a targeted effect to these things, and you want to be careful about overtaxing the body by moving things specifically in the lymphatic or bloodstream, so that we don't move things around. Absolutely, specifically after a surgery. Specifically if it's a cancer surgery, right? So if a woman has had a mastectomy, or, I believe they call, we don't have to get on all the details there, but OOFs and other bodily surgeries that remove cancer from the body. That's right. Dr. Nicole said she's kind of the follow-up to make sure nothing gets left behind. But typically a lot of the interventions now are surgery based. So after a surgery, there is a chance that there are cancer cells still in the system in that area, and you don't want to spread that. The other, even before that, there's the chance that the cancer has metastasized into the bloodstream or in a different area. And again, you don't want to be spreading these things around. So it is very, very important to be mindful of talking to your doctors about if you are a candidate, if it's contraindicated or indicated, to be getting massage or bodywork. Now, I've talked about the differences between massage or bodywork in the past. Massage is typically contraindicated because it's moving fluids around the body very specifically. A properly trained oncologist bodyworker can work with oncology patients because they know what they're doing and they know what not to do. So if you're going to get any bodywork, massage, or any other treatment at that level, make sure you're getting it from a qualified individual that has oncology training. The only ones of them I know about that are actually pretty standard in the country are individuals who work with the Cancer Treatment of America. They have specific oncology massage therapists who are trained as a medical massage therapist with a specialization in oncology. Again, not my track, not something I really dived into. I dived into the contraindications and the indications to know, can I work safely on an individual? So on that side of things, here's what I can tell you. Anytime you have a surgery that removes lymph nodes, because when cancer surgery is done, they might remove lymph nodes that have been affected by the cancer. If there is more than 10, and honestly, I even say more than 5 lymph nodes removed in an axial, which means, at the hips or the shoulders, typically, those are the axial network areas. So axials are our legs and arms. If we've had lymph nodes removed, or if the individual's had lymph nodes removed in those areas more than, again, I'm going to say 5, but typically they say 10, we don't work on that limb. And if we do, we're very careful about it because we can cause something called lymphedema. Lymphedema is very dangerous. And edema means swelling, specifically fluid in an area. And lymphedema is swelling of the lymph nodes and the lymphatic system. That can cause all sorts of problems. And so we have to be mindful if someone has had lymph nodes removed or damaged. There's another thing called pitted edema, which is also very dangerous, and I'd like people to know about. Edema, again, swelling or fluid in an area. Pitted edema is swelling that when you press it, it does not depress. You will see this in type 1, type 2 diabetics in some instances, and you also see it around massive trauma areas. And by massive, I mean hard impact or broken bones. It will swell so much that when you press on that edema, that swelling, it doesn't depress. Another very dangerous situation. So as far as cancer and body work, oncologists will know typically to tell you, go see an oncology certified massage therapist or body worker. As a body worker myself in the industry, there's not a lot of them, I can tell you that. And so you must be very careful about who you choose. If you walk into a situation and you think it's a good idea to not tell your body worker or massage therapist something, sorry, you are wrong. We can cause you harm. We don't want to. Please don't put it on our consciousness that we could do that or we did do that. I've had many situations where I've got done a treatment or done a session with a client back when I worked in more of the spa setting. And they would say, "Oh, I'm so thankful," and then they would tell me what they didn't tell me at the beginning. And I would just sit there and I would worry all day that I might have just done something to this person, that it'll now be my responsibility. I'm going to lose my license if something happens. Like, it just puts us in a situation where we'd never want to touch you ever again. And honestly, sometimes I've had the experience where I'm like, I'm just done with this field. I just want to be done with this. It just eats at you. I've had it eat at me till the next time the client came back in, because they didn't tell me something. And I was like, I could have caused you so much harm. And one little episode like that, if you would have ended up in the hospital, and their answer is always, "Oh, well, I would have never said anything." I'm like, they would have found out. They would have been like, "Well, what did you do? Where did you go?" They would have figured these things out. Like, we are part of the medical system in some way. We have a licensure from the state health board. So please be honest with your body workers, massage therapists. I'll extend that to reiterate something Dr. Nicole said, as far as, please be honest with your medical practitioners and your professionals, right? Like, just tell them. They need to know this information. Write it down if you don't remember, or write it down if you're prone to not remembering. Getting into the subjective and objective, like, subjective is the things you experience. The objective is what we take out of that. So it's just important to be honest with your practitioners in that way. But body work can be contraindicated for certain things. Anytime there's a disease that we can spread around the body, if there's an infection, if there's it would take me too long to get into all of it, but you can look up or ask your medical professionals, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting a massage. I'm thinking about getting body work. Is it contraindicated for me?" Contraindicated means you shouldn't be doing it, or that practitioner should not be doing any work on you at all. Now, there are contraindications that are specific to areas of the body. And so it's worth the conversation to have, or it's worth having the conversation to be like, well, oh, I have a sinus infection. It's non-upper respiratory. It's just a sinus infection. Cool. I'm just not going to work on your face or your head. I might even just generally avoid the upper body. But, if we work on your lower body or some other things, maybe work on the lower back a little bit. Like, probably don't want to be face down the entire time. But, there are certain things that we can get around in that sense. I will make this blanket statement because a lot of people don't know this one. If you've had an injection, a steroid, an antibacterial, antibiotic, or anything along those lines, give it 72 hours, please. When we talk about injections specifically, if you've gotten a shot, cortisol, vaccine, anything, those are designed to sit in specific tissues, in specific areas for specific reasons. If I go in there and start moving muscles and fascia around, I'm going to move it out of that area. I might even cause you to have to go get that shot again. I don't want to do that. So, and you don't want to have to go do that either. So tell them, tell the individual, tell the practitioner, I've advocated for years that on the giving blood card should include massage and bodywork. Just put a little thing, they put in like, don't do machinery, massage and bodywork. You have no idea how many people have come to me after giving blood because they're just like taking the day off, right? And they just want to relax because they just gave blood. I'm like, I can make you pass out on the table. Like I could work on you and then you could walk out the door and your blood pressure drops and poof, you fall over or pass out trying to, no, we don't touch you. We don't work on you. So yeah, the contraindication and indication world is vast. Even comes down to medications. Oftentimes I have to look at individuals who are on a statin or on a blood thinner and be like, hey, are you on both? Because you might bruise easily. Let's be careful. Do you bruise easily in general? So a good body worker will know their contraindications and indications. Indications are things that are like, yeah, do this, work on this. We see that in things like fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis. Just general treatment sets. Like if you have frozen shoulder or if you have tennis or golfer's elbow, which is just lateral or medial epicondylitis. These are indicated. These are things bodywork's supposed to be able to work on. So yeah, a good body worker will know their contraindications and indications. Given that the education systems suck, which I mentioned before, my hyper critique of the education systems, most massage therapists will have no freaking idea what you're talking about because they were never taught. They were taught some basic contraindications, indications, but they're mostly taught to turn away people. And if they don't know, to refer out. I'm not against that. I think they are not educated enough to make that call. So yes, they should just be like, sorry, I don't know enough about this. I can't work on you. I apologize, but we'll have to reschedule you. And don't expect them to follow up by doing any research because look, they're turning and burning clients at a spa. That's what spas do. Your body worker, on the other hand, should be able to look at you and go, hey, I don't know enough about this to work on you safely today. Give me some time. Let me do some research and I'll figure out if it is safe or not. The best answer anyone can ever give you, and Dr. Nicole said this, I don't know. I follow that up with, I'm willing to try to find out. Look, I'd rather have someone tell me I don't know and that they're willing to find out than to lie to my face or to generally actually not know and do something anyway. That's yeah, it's just better to say, I don't know, and I'm willing to find out. Let's see. We've covered quite a bit. I wanted to mention that vocabulary is very important. I've thrown out a lot of terms in this episode just about general, cancer and, chemotherapy, oncology, body work, contraindications, indications, diet. We hear all these words. Vocabulary is a very important thing I think everyone should work on. And if you have a medical condition or if you have a disease of any type, you should learn the vocabulary that goes around it. Know the word contraindication, know the word indication, know what is advised, not advised, but also what is edema? Okay, swelling, right? Itis typically means inflammation. Dr. Nicole talked about inflammation, how itises are, it's inflammation in the body. It's doing something, it's inflaming something. She was actually talking about how when they were first figuring out immunotherapy, doing the trials, that they would see itis of the cancer itself. They would see a swelling of the cancer. That allowed in my personal opinion, conjecture, it allowed the T cells, not only did the immunotherapy turn back on the signaling that thing shouldn't be there, but it also allowed the T cells access to that by inflaming it so that they could get into
I'm
destroy
sorry,
that.
but you've hit the daily limit for
Yeah,
advanced
thanks,
voice.
Octavia. I
You
appreciate
can
that.
switch to standard now to keep chatting.
Right. Looks like Octavia might not work out as my co-host. But to finish this episode up, so vocabulary is very important. Think about vocabulary. I'll get into mitochondrial health another time in a different episode. I want to finish up with my thoughts on cancer. And this is a hot take. It's not standard. It has no basis in anything Dr. Nicole and I talked about. I would refer to her, and I have on many occasions, in our discussions, referred to her about like, hey, what do you know about this? What do you, have you heard about this? Cancer's an interesting topic, and I've done a lot of research on disease and cancer and dysfunction. And honestly, I'm going to say I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. And so I'm just going to go over what I've found out so far and my own personal, non-professional conjectures, which just means, conclusions I've drawn from the information I've found. That doesn't mean you should take any of this and run with it. You shouldn't take anything I say with run with it. You should always do your own research. I know people hate hearing that, but that's the world we live in nowadays. So to finish up with my understanding of cancer, I'm going to break it down from the very beginning. Cancer is a cell that has replicated in a fashion in which it no longer does its function. It is replicated incorrectly. It has then corrupted that cell and the cells around it into taking resources from the system to continue to replicate as fast as possible. In my personal opinion, this would show that cancer is in some way intelligent. And I think some people have heard that before. I know some individuals have made those statements before. What I mean by intelligent is it means it knows to take resources and it knows to replicate to continue to take more resources. Here's where it's unintelligent and why I don't think it's virally based. Viruses know not to kill the host for the most part. They want to replicate outside of the host and spread. Cancer doesn't spread. If someone has cancer, they don't give you cancer. It only replicates in the body and it destroys body tissue and function. So it's intelligent enough to know to take over the system and to use the system's resources to replicate itself. For what end? I don't know. I have tried to find out though. Where I found cross research that gives me the ability to say the following statement is in primates and also other mammals on the veterinary side of things. Bear with me here. When it comes to the major vectors, and a vector is an angle, a way for something to come at the system. The major vectors for disease in the human system are viral, bacterial, and fungal. Those are the things that enter the system to use the system's resources to either replicate itself, mostly to replicate itself. And some of them will work in the system, well, not homeostasis, but without killing the host. Funguses are pretty darn intelligent. And they are capable of taking over the system intelligently. Viruses, not so much as far as the way cancer reacts. Bacteria, similar, but bacteria are very susceptible of not taking over the cells. They live on their own and they make their own little colonies and do their own little thing. Funguses kind of do the same thing too. They don't really take over the cells. They just kind of make a colony and they do their own thing. So the corruption of the cell would typically only be on the viral side. But antivirals don't work on cancer, as far as I know. I Probably should ask Dr. Nicole about that more. But those are the three major vectors. There's a fourth vector of disease in the human system and the mammal system, the mammalian system, that we don't talk about a lot because we only talk about it typically on the animal side and the veterinarian side. This is where I'm going to lose everybody. It's parasites. I asked a vet I used to work with about the antiparasitic schedule for primates, specifically in zoos, because she happened to work with NIH and she's had some zoo experience. And she said it's around yearly, if not bi-yearly, so every 6 months. I said, that's interesting. What about monkeys? She said something similar. Other mammals have different schedules, but then I said, okay, mammalian, are there any mammals that you know about in veterinary medicine who don't have a parasitic or an antiparasitic schedule? And she said, not that I know of. And that got me thinking about the human system. I never once in all of my research or training came across a parasitic schedule for humans. It's not something we discuss. The only time someone goes on an antiparasitic is if a parasite has been found in the system causing damage. Some people get parasitic infections of the eyes. Some people get it in the stomach. But parasites are a funny thing. They don't replicate like viruses do, and they don't create colonies so much like funguses and bacteria do. Parasites will go dormant, and all they're there to do is live off the host. I believe personally that some, not all, cancers are a byproduct of damage caused by a parasite. And that parasite damages the cells, and then the cells replicate incorrectly, causing a cancer to form. Now, does that mean all cancer is caused by parasites? Absolutely not. But just like exercise can reduce our risk, diet can reduce our risk, staying away from carcinogens, staying away from processed foods, staying away from plastics and harsh chemicals, like the Roundups and all that stuff, the Agent Orange that Dr. Nicole talked about. I think an antiparasitic and staying away from parasites is part of that function. Parasites are the one thing that has an intelligence, is willing to live off the host, but doesn't care if the host lives or dies because it is willing to go and spread elsewhere. And so it can cause mass amounts of damage, specifically at the cellular level, because it's going to be attacking cells and using them as food sources. Here's another thing cancer loves that parasites love: sugar. I would make the recommendation, if you're worried about cancer, either having a risk of it or, just in general, or if someone in your family had it, or if you think you're at high risk, or if you have or are under treatment for, getting rid of sugar out of your diet will help. I've seen enough anecdotally and also research-based to say, yeah, cancer likes sugar. It'll feed off of it. It gives it resources. It's like jet fuel for cancer, right? We're just giving it fuel. We're just giving it ATP. We're just giving it carbohydrates. We're just giving it everything it needs to grow, right? And cancer isn't controlled growth. It just populates as quickly as possible. So limiting sugar intake in that system will starve it for resources, just like we would be starving out a parasite. That's one of the ways you get rid of parasites as far as making them go dormant, is not providing them a food source they like. That works for funguses too. The whole candida thing. If you don't give it the resource it likes to eat, it stops propagating. So it's conjectured, but I think as far as just a safe habit, right? A parasitic cleanse is a fairly safe thing to go about. Talk to your doctors about it, but wormwood and black walnut, pretty solid one. But doing a regular antiparasitic cleanse, I think, is something that I would even put on the cancer preventative. It's an anti-cancer preventative, not, anti-cancer treatments are different than anti-cancer preventatives. I do a lot of anti-cancer preventatives. I do a regular parasitic cleanse. I stay away from carcinogens and processed foods. Those are all anti-cancer preventatives. So I think parasitic schedules would be good things for humans to have. In fact, other countries in the world, not that I can name right now because, well, if you name any country, you're in trouble nowadays. But there are other countries that have antiparasitics that are just like you go to CVS, it would be at CVS. You just grab it, you do it, the whole thing. It's pretty common. The amount of parasites that are just in soil is amazing. Right? You walking, I'm not saying don't walk around barefoot because yes, grounding is good for you. But look, our skin can pick up parasites. They're parasites small enough that can just go right through your skin, get into your system. All it takes is a small little cut. Like any, look under your nails, right? If you dig around dirt and you got a little micro cut, it's going to get in your system. You probably have some sort of parasite in your system right now. It's a good thing to just do an antiparasitic cleanse. They have to be done specifically because of a gestation period. I know it's gross, but parasites replicate. They leave eggs behind. As the progenitor dies, then the egg hatches. So if you kill off the progenitor, the eggs might still hatch afterwards. So typically an antiparasitic schedule goes for about 5 to 7 days, take a week off, and then another 5 to 7 days. And that's just to allow the gestation of the new batch of parasites to hatch and then to kill them off as well. Cancer as a factor of health risk is increasing nearly exponentially. And so I believe it has to be environmental in some way or another. That's why I think the processed foods are the number one cause, in my personal opinion, because it tracks the amount of processed foods on the market and the levels of cancer in the populace. They're linear curves together. When we talk about nicotine and those type of chemical interactions, cigarettes bad, carcinogens bad. Nicotine is a nootropic. There's a lot of people out there on the zinnies doing that type of stuff. You got to be mindful. You don't swallow nicotine, right? If like I'm a realist, right? People are going to continue to smoke. They're going to continue to chew tobacco. They're going to continue to take zinnies. Look, I can't stop these people from doing these things. All I can do is give them the information that you should probably stop. It's probably going to harm you in some way or another. But if you are someone who is trying to wean yourself off or use some of the outside interventions there, as far as like, the nicotine patches, the gum, the Nicorette and stuff like that, keep in mind, if you're taking a lozenger or chewing or using a zinni, you should be spitting that out. Nicotine is really rough on the gut biome and the gut system. It actually damages the stomach lining and the intestinal lining. So yeah, like don't be messing up your system that way. So you just have to be mindful of all these different things. But cancer as a function is increasing in the populaces. It is a very dangerous thing. Limiting your sugar, I think, is one great thing. Doing an antiparasitic cleanse. There are things out there that have shown anti-cancer properties. Mogricides are one of my most fascinating deep dives I've ever done. Mogricides are what's found in something like a monk fruit. Monk fruit has I think it's 23 or 13. I forget which different mogricides, which are a compound that is shown to be anti-cancer. And there's specific mogricides that are a little bit more anti-cancer than others. Monk fruit, I think it's 3 and 13 or something like that. There's other things that have shown anti-cancer. One of my favorites is chaga mushrooms. Chaga mushrooms typically grow on birch trees. And here's how amazing nature is, that if you go out and you look at a birch tree and you see a chaga mushrooms look like burnt slag. So like melted metal. They're burnt and they kind of crust up. If you've ever seen, or you can look up a picture of a birch tree that has a chaga mushroom growing off of it, what happens is the chaga mushroom grows off of it and the chaga spores, they go off on the breeze and they run into these birch trees. And anywhere a birch tree has a cut or if it's been damaged, they proliferate on those damaged areas. And typically what happens is trees can get cancer too. To give you an understanding of how that works, it's typically from a outside insect, parasite, something along those lines, that invades the tree. You'll see that gnarled kind of like rotted piece of the tree there. Well, what happens is the chaga mushroom spores get on that and then they start growing and they overtake the quote unquote cancer that's growing on that tree. Someone looked at this and found this and started doing some research on it. There was a fascinating book. I'm not sure if you can get your hands on it, but it's called The Cancer Ward. And it's about an individual who was in Siberia and had cancer and went to this cancer ward, and they treated them with chaga tea. Am I saying chaga tea is going to solve cancer or completely eliminate? No. It does show anti-cancer properties, though. I regularly take chaga in my diet. I think it's tasty, so I take chaga powder. I add it to protein shakes, But that's true for all of the medicinal mushrooms, like lion's mane's great for your brain. There's turkey tail, chaga, reishi, so they all have these different properties. I just like to give my system as much help as I can by making the functions work correctly, as well as to give it all of these bonus things if I'm targeting something specific. Chaga mushrooms have been known to have anti-cancer properties. So I give my body the thing that helps with that. When we talk about how the body deals with cancer, right? So we're talking about, Dr. Nicole was talking about how immunotherapies work. Cancer has an ability, which is why I believe it shows some sort of intelligence, to turn off the signal for your T cells, your hunter-killer cells, to go attack something. And what hunter-killer cells do is they kill something or they break something up or they neutralize a cell so that the macrophages can come along and clean it up. The macrophages are like Pac-Man. They come along and they eat all the stuff and then they go and they drop it off at the disposal unit and get rid of it. The T cells are what go in and neutralize those cells so that the macrophages then can come along and collect all the debris. Cancer has a way of turning off that signal and saying, hey, don't look here. I'm supposed to be here. We're all good. I'm part of the system. We're all friendly here. Go away, T cell. Look somewhere else. Immunotherapies turn off that signaling from the cancer cells so that the T cells go, whoa, wait a minute, like a bouncer, and go, hey, you're not supposed to be here. Get out. Anti-cancer anything should help with that signaling. And I believe that's the function. And there was a doctor who wrote about the function of chaga mushroom in providing that turning off of the signal, while then also boosting the immune system to deal with it. Because the properties in chaga mushroom, that's essentially what they did for the tree. It's a little bit conjecture. The individual I'm talking about did and the reason I'm not mentioning the name is because it's super controversial and I don't even want to get into that whole process. I'll just say it was a Russian doctor, again, in Siberia. So, the research and the protocols and all the stuff that went on with it, it gets a little shady. But the individual was a practicing doctor out in rural Russia, and they kept hearing this thing called conquer tea. And it was something that the miners who were prone to cancer, given mining, and the lay people of the town would go out and they would drink this conquer tea. And what they were doing is they were going out and they were harvesting chaga mushrooms from birch trees and making tea out of it. And honestly, I've done it. It's very I think it's delicious. And they would drink 3, 4, 5, 6 cups a day of this tea. And at the time, the individual was writing back and forth from colleagues who lived in city centers, and he was living out in rural, like middle of nowhere. And he was reading about his colleagues and this cancer bloom, this elevation of cancer in the populace that they were seeing across the board. And his little town that also had miners and other lay people who would have, exposure to what would be considered carcinogens, wasn't seeing the same level that his colleagues was. And so he found that these individuals were drinking this tea of the conqueror mushroom, what they call the conqueror mushroom, which is the chaga mushroom. And so he did some research on it, and the research is honestly not great. It's very old research, and it's a little bit anecdotal, and there's, you know, a lot of holes there. I think we should do a ton of research on that to see if, you know, that's a possibility. Paul Stamets is probably already on it, but these are the things that we see a byproduct in nature. And that's what led me to the understanding that I believe that there's a secondary avenue of dysfunction in the body that allows cancer to take hold. We used to say that it's some, you know, gamma ray that the atmosphere or the, you know, didn't, whatever, the whole sunlight all of a sudden hits you and then now you get cancer. Look, does that explain some? I'm sure. Radiation, absolutely. Radiation can cause cancer in the body. It causes the cell to divide the wrong way and causes an issue. I think other things have the ability to do that too. One of those I believe to be parasites. So protecting yourselves from all these things is tough and it's a long game, but it's a requirement I think is necessary in modern society and living. So don't obsess about it. Think about it. Listen to Dr. Nicole's episode if you haven't already, and really dive into, like, you know, am I at risk? What are my risk factors? What conversations should I be having? Do I need to be taking a preventative? What kind of monitoring should I be doing? But you should be doing that about all disease and all health and wellness, even if it just comes down to weight loss, right? Like, what are you doing to support your weight loss? How are you monitoring your weight loss? Regular weigh-ins are not how we monitor weight loss. We monitor it with measurements, like real true measurements. That's the best way to do it. What's your arm, thigh, waist, height, chest, and calf? What are those measurements, right? Are you losing mass? Because really we're talking about mass loss, not so much weight loss. Muscle is denser and heavier than fat. So that pretty much sums up the things that I was kind of thinking about when I was talking to Dr. Nicole. She gave a great understanding of the industry that is oncology and how she got into it, how she works inside of it every day, right? She is working around death every day. It's a hard job. I can't even imagine just her mental state every day and how she goes through all that. But she also did mention like how she keeps herself sane and exercising. And I think the thing I'll leave off on, because this is a general health and wellness podcast, one of the comments she made is very prudent. She said the reason she exercises is because the chance of her having some sort of issue in the future is highly likely, and exercise will help make going through that better. I think that's true for anything we can think of as far as being mindful and monitoring our health and doing the things that we know to make people healthy. Monitoring your diet, monitoring your exercise, doing it even though it sucks, worrying about preventatives and taking some sort of preventative action, be it, you know, my crazy level of antiparasitics and anti-cancer supplementation, and, you know, but it could be easy as just getting better sleep and watching your sleep health and monitoring that as well. I thank you for joining me on this episode. Thank you to Dr. Nicole. It was a wonderful conversation. Hope to have more people on in the future to cover other topics. As a note, we are an affiliate of purebulk.com. You can go over to purebulk.com to get any supplement you could possibly think of. I've been affiliate of theirs forever. Their quality is nearly unmatched in the industry. They're just everything about them. Their shipping, their quality control, everything's lab tested and certified outside of their organizations, third partied. You can get the lab results if you want them. Just everything about them, their customer service, dealing with Glenn and the crew over there. It's always been a wonderful experience with Pure Bulk, buying from them. So if you want to get some supplements, head over to purebulk.com and use Stoic Bodywork 15 for 15% off your first order. And you can also use Stoic Bodywork 10 for 10% off any future orders after that. So check out purebulk.com for all of your supplement needs. And I will catch you on the next episode when we continue our dive into health and wellness. Thank you. Take care.